Israel carried out genocidal acts against Palestinians by systematically destroying women's healthcare facilities during the war on Palestine and used sexual violence as a war strategy, United Nations experts said in a new report today. Israel's permanent mission to the UN in Geneva described allegations in the report as unfounded, biased and lacking credibility. Israeli authorities have destroyed in part the reproductive capacity of Palestinians in Gaza as a group, including by imposing measures intended to prevent births, one of the categories of the genocidal acts in the Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention, said the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Those actions, in addition to a surge in maternity deaths due to restricted access to medical supplies, amounted to a crime against humanity of extermination, the Commission said. The report accused Israel's security forces of using forced public stripping and sexual assault as part of their standard operating procedures to punish Palestinians following the Hamas-led attacks on southern Israel in October 2023. Israel rejected the accusations. The IDF have concrete directives and policies which unequivocally prohibit such misconduct. The permanent mission to the UN in Geneva responded in a statement, adding that its review processes are in line with international standards. A previous report published by the Commission in June 2024 accused Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups of serious rights violations in its October 7th attacks in 2023, including torture and degrading treatment. People in Gaza and Amman gathered for iftar meals on Tuesday organized by Taqiyat Ali, a food relief Jordanian non-governmental organization. Taqiyat Ali, which was founded in 2003, has assisted Palestinians in Gaza since the beginning of the war on Palestine, delivering around 70,000 food parcels and 40,000 jackets, according to the organization's Director General, Samir Belkar.
بغزة احنا من بداية الحرب شغالين مع غزة مع بداية العدوان الغاشم. صرنا منزلين حوالي 70,000 فرد غذائي و40,000 رغيف، ولكن رمضان برضه له خصوصيته، فاحنا بالتوازي واحنا هون شغالين على موعد الرحمن في عمان، في المحطة في عمان برضه بنقيم موعد الرحمن في جباليا وفي الشجاعية، وتقريبا بمعدل بين 1000 ل 2000 وجبة إفطار برضه يوميا، تحديدا في شمال غزة.
Footage provided by the organization showed volunteers distributing meals to families in an area surrounded by tents in Jabalia, which a band performed live music to those present at the event. Reuters could verify the location and date of the videos with metadata of the original files. Balka said that the organization prepared 15 trucks for Gaza and sent them out for the month of Ramadan.
في حصار على غزة من أسبوع تقريبا، تم إغلاق المعابر. احنا جهزنا تقريبا حوالي 15 شاحنة خاصة فينا احنا كتكية علي، نزلناها تحضيرا لشهر رمضان اللي من خلالها عم نحضر لوجبات غزة، واللي يعني اللي مش موجود نتعاقد فيه النواقص نتعاقد فيها مع السوق المحلي بغزة على يعني محدوديته وشحه، ولكن الأغلب هو المواد اللي احنا عم ننزلها. الأوضاع صعبة جدا.
Israel cut aid flows of food, medicine and fuel imports earlier this month, a move it said was designed to pressure Hamas into ceasefire talks. In parallel to Gaza, Taqiyat Ali also hosts charitable iftar meals in Jordan.
احنا حابين نوصل رسالة للعالم كله انه يكونوا هون بأي مكان في عمل خير عشان الأطفال محتاجين، كبار بالعمر، اللي ذو حاجة خاصة بأي مكان بدول العالم سواء بغزة أو غير غزة، بأي مكان محتاجين لازم يكون أي شخص يكون موجود، أي شخص لازم نساعده.
On Tuesday, the charity organization hosted an iftar in Amman, providing free meals for those in need in a Ramadan tent which can accommodate up to 5,000 people, organizers said.
Hundreds of protesters rallied outside a New York City courtroom on Wednesday, demanding the release of Columbia University student Mahmoud Khalil. This case has become a flashpoint of the Trump administration's pledge to deport pro-Palestinian college activists. He was arrested by Department of Homeland Security agents outside his university residence in Manhattan on Saturday. U.S. District Judge Jesse Furman had temporarily blocked Khalil's deportation earlier this week. At a hearing on Wednesday, he extended that order to allow himself more time to consider whether the arrest was unconstitutional. Ramzi Qasim, one of Khalil's attorneys, spoke to reporters after the hearing.
It is absolutely unprecedented, the grounds that are being cited by the government for purportedly claiming to revoke his green card and putting him in removal proceedings. This is a person who is a lawful permanent resident. This is a U.S. person. Those grounds are vague, they are rarely used, essentially they are a form of punishment and retaliation for the exercise of free speech.
Khalil, a green card holder, played a prominent role in demonstrations against Israel's war in Gaza, which rocked Columbia's campus last spring. The Trump administration has, without presenting evidence, accused Khalil of supporting Hamas, which Washington labels a terrorist group.
Pakistani security forces stormed a train on Wednesday that had been hijacked by separatist militants, killing all 33 attackers and ending a day-long standoff involving hundreds of hostages, the military said. The Baloch Liberation Army, or BLA, blew up a railway track and opened fire on the train as it was traveling through southwestern Pakistan. It was carrying over 400 passengers. Some passengers released by militants reunited with their families in Quetta earlier on Wednesday. A military spokesperson said 21 hostages and 4 security troops were killed over the course of the standoff. The BLA said before the army announcement that it had killed 50 passengers. The group had threatened to start executing hostages unless authorities met a 48-hour deadline for the release of political prisoners, activists, and missing people it says had been abducted by the military. The BLA is the largest of several ethnic armed groups battling the government in Balochistan. In recent months, militants increased activities to inflict high death and injury tolls and target Pakistan's military.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday said he hoped that if Russia were to accept an immediate ceasefire proposed by the U.S., the two sides could use the 30-day truce to draft a comprehensive peace plan. But so far, Moscow has said it is waiting for more information about the proposal unveiled a day ago.
But as far as the Russian reaction to it, that's really the question here.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that response to the proposal would say a great deal about Russia's aims.
If their response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear.
Rubio announced the outlines of the proposal a day ago after more than 8 hours of discussions with Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly said a short-term truce is not the way to end the war. Ukraine has also long said it rejected a short-term ceasefire unless it included the withdrawal of Russian forces from territories seized, warning that Moscow could use a lull in the fighting to reposition its troops for future offensives. Kiev seemed to relent on that front Tuesday in a possible sign of improved ties with Washington after an Oval Office shouting match between Zelensky and President Donald Trump on February 28th.
You're gambling with World War III.
Trump subsequently cut off military support and the sharing of crucial intelligence. But on Wednesday, he sounded a positive note with reporters.
We have to see, it's up to Russia now. But we've had a good relationship with both parties, actually.
And his administration said military aid and intelligence sharing with Kiev had resumed. Ukrainian troops this week appeared on the point of losing their hard-won foothold inside Russia's Kursk region. Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine in early 2022 has left hundreds of thousands of dead and injured, displaced millions of people, reduced towns to rubble, and triggered the biggest confrontation between Moscow and the West in 6 decades.
China will take all necessary measures to safeguard its rights and interests, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said yesterday. The statement came after US President Donald Trump's increased tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports took effect. The Chinese response levies 25% on all American imports of steel and aluminium and could extend the duties to hundreds of downstream products made from the metals, from nuts and bolts to bulldozer blades and soda cans. The US move violated World Trade Organization rules, said Mao Ning, spokesperson at the Chinese Foreign Ministry, at a regular press conference. She added, China has always believed that protectionism has no way out, and there are no winners in trade wars and tariff wars. This is also the general consensus of the international community. The US approach seriously violates the rules of the WTO, seriously damages the rules-based multilateral trading system, and is not towards solving the problem. China will take all necessary measures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. Trump's tariffs are an attempt to reorder global trade in favour of the United States. They have been applied to Europe and the UK as well as to China. They drew swift retaliation from Europe as well as from China. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said, "If tariffs are now imposed in their place, this will do the most damage to the American economy, but it will also harm many others. And so the answer for Europe is clear. We must use our strength and therefore also respond strongly and appropriately, but always with the prospect of reaching an understanding that avoids tariffs and promotes trade and economic exchange and the prosperity that results from it." But Keir Starmer did not respond with tariffs of his own.
On the question of tariffs, obviously, like everybody else, I'm disappointed to see global tariffs in relation to steel and aluminium. But we will take a pragmatic approach. We are, as he knows, negotiating an economic deal which covers and will include tariffs if we succeed. But we will keep all options on the table.
He appears to be attempting to maintain what he imagines is the special relationship with Donald Trump.
The region called the Thousand Islands straddles the US-Canada border where the St. Lawrence River runs between the two countries. It draws sightseers from both sides who ride riverboats between the picturesque and castle-like island mansions. But US President Donald Trump's sharp trade measures and hostile words toward Canada are starting to sour Canadian tourists on American destinations.
What we've noticed is a lot of our potential visitors, particularly on the Canadian side, they're quite angry. They're quite hurt by what they see as policy and rhetoric that is attacking.
Corey Fram is the director of the Thousand Islands International Tourism Council and says the change in tone is taking a toll.
From what I'm hearing, and I've talked to travel professionals from the Canadian side, from the Atlantic to the Pacific this week, what they're hearing from their audiences, whether those are readers or whether those are bus tour passengers, is that some of their folks are telling them they're going to vote with their dollars and they're not going to come visit the United States.
Canada and the U.S. have long shared the world's longest peaceful border between any two countries. The two flags could fly side by side. But now, Fram says he has had to adjust his marketing.
So what we have done is kind of pivoted to New York landmarks being shown to New York audiences, Canadian landmarks being shown to Canadian target audiences.
Travelers seem to be responding with their wallets. Flight data tracking firm Forward Keys reported new bookings to the United States from Canada have declined about 20% since February 1st, compared with the year-ago period.
In hotels in states that are closest to the border, we've seen a decline in room demand basically since the inauguration.
Jan Freitag is with the data analytics firm CoStar and says Saturday night hotel bookings in border towns such as Niagara Falls and Bellingham, Washington have dropped. United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby said on Tuesday the company has adjusted its capacity due to a drop in incoming traffic from Canada.
We have not seen a significant drop in business yet, only because it's hard to quantify.
Fram told Reuters his tourist season doesn't begin in earnest until the spring.
But with our core season really picking up around Victoria Day weekend in May, that's when we might start to actually see cancellations.
The U.S. Department of Education said on Tuesday it would lay off nearly half its staff, a possible first step towards a total shutdown.
Nobody shows up to work because
the move comes as government agencies scramble to meet President Donald Trump's Thursday deadline to submit plans for a second round of mass layoffs. The terminations are part of what the department called in a press release its, quote, final mission, alluding to Trump's vow to eliminate the department.
President Trump understands that we'll be working with Congress.
Asked on Fox News whether the firings would lead to the department's dismantling, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon said yes, adding that doing so, quote, was the president's mandate. The Department of Education oversees $1.6 trillion in college loans, enforces civil rights laws in schools, and provides federal funding for needy districts. The department said affected employees will be placed on administrative leave starting on March 21st. Meanwhile, the union representing more than 2,800 department workers there vowed to fight what it called the draconian cuts. The layoffs are the latest step in Trump's sweeping effort to downsize the government. Led by billionaire Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE has cut more than 100,000 jobs across the 2.3 million member federal civilian bureaucracy, frozen most foreign aid, and canceled thousands of programs and contracts. Dozens of lawsuits have been filed challenging the legality of those moves, and the blunt force approach has frustrated several White House officials and Republican lawmakers, some of whom have been confronted by angry constituents at town halls.
South Korean military investigators on Thursday charged 2 Air Force pilots with criminal negligence, causing bodily harm for accidentally bombing a village during a training exercise. The incident injured at least 29 people and caused extensive property damage. The Defense Ministry's Criminal Investigation Command said the pilots' errors in entering coordinates were direct factors behind the accidental bombing. 8 unguided bombs from 2 fighter jets hit a village in Pocheon during live-fire exercises. The area features training grounds used by the South Korean and US militaries. A ministry official said that the 2 pilots have been removed from flight duties, and a review of their certification is scheduled. The Air Force Chief of Staff apologized last week and pledged to review procedures to prevent future incidents. North Korea, which often criticizes South Korean and US military drills, said the accident highlighted the risk of conflict, noting the bombs could have dropped north of the border. An investigation into the incident is ongoing.
Former Philippine leader Rodrigo Duterte has been taken into custody by the International Criminal Court following his arrest in Manila on murder charges linked to his war on drugs. That's according to a statement from the court, or ICC, on Wednesday. The 79-year-old arrived at Rotterdam airport on a chartered plane and was transferred to a detention unit on the Dutch coast. He will be brought before an ICC judge in The Hague in the coming days for an initial appearance, the statement said. The court's warrant for his arrest alleges that, as president, Duterte created, funded, and armed death squads that carried out murders of purported drug users and dealers. Duterte's war on drugs was a signature of his presidency, which lasted from 2016 to 2022. The anti-drugs crackdown killed thousands and drew condemnation from around the world. He could become the first Asian former head of state to go on trial at the ICC. Supporters and protesters gathered outside the court.
Want him to be jailed? We want him to suffer, but he actually is lucky because he is experiencing the due process of law compared to the victims that they were just being shot and killed without any due process.
They handed our president to foreigners.
It's a shame.
It's a shame. What they did was shameful. They brought shame to our country.
In Manila, the remains of more than a dozen victims of extrajudicial killings were laid to rest Wednesday, part of a non-governmental organization's program aimed at helping impoverished victims find a resting place for their slain relatives. The 44-year-old son of Josephine Camendo, who was killed in 2016, was among the remains interred. The justice that we want for those who have died is slowly moving forward, she said.
This machine has enabled an Australian man with severe heart failure to be the first person in the world to leave hospital with an artificial heart transplant, a warning that the images coming up show the surgery. The 6-hour operation took place in late 2024 at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney. The bivocal total artificial heart replicates both sides of the organ and is stitched onto the heart before being turned on, as transplant surgeon Dr. Paul Jans explains.
That's a sort of, a moment where everyone holds their breath, but it turns on and it works. And then you slowly wean the patient off the heart-lung machine, which is keeping them alive while you do the surgery, and the pump takes over. And it did.
Invented by scientist Dr. Daniel Timms, it's designed as a bridge to keep patients alive until a donor heart transplant is possible.
He had the device for 104 days before his transplant, so 3.5 months, and he was discharged from hospital along that way. And so that was, a world first for us. I mean, ultimately that's what our goal is, to return these patients back to a normal quality of life. And he did return to a normal quality of life outside of the hospital. So, this gives us an incredible hope that in the future we won't need to bring him back in for a transplant, that they can just stay out, keep the device, for the rest of their life.
The patient was the 6th person in the world to receive the implantable device, but he was the only one to be discharged with the artificial organ. The rest remained in hospital and awaited donor transplants. The Australian patient underwent surgery for a donor heart transplant this month and is recovering well.